against the light you shine on me. Your angel eyes won't set me free. Why can't you save yourself? I don't deserve your heart or hell. I'm drowning your devotion to me. Baby, we can't fight our nature. I'm your demon, you're my savior. You bring out my worst behavior. Let's go. Worst behavior. Worst behavior. Baby, we can't fight our nature. I'm your demon, you're my savior. You bring out my worst behavior. You try to fix me when I'm too far gone. I try to hurt you every time I run. Why can't you save yourself? I don't deserve your heart or hell. I'm drowning your devotion to me. Baby, we can't fight our nature. I'm your demon, you're my savior. You bring out my worst behavior. Let's go.
All right, let's go ahead and get started here this morning. The thing that I want to work on is something that I mentioned on a few streams ago, is trying to make it a little easier to bind primitives to Laravel's container from configuration. I know that Taylor Otwell has asked in the past if anyone even uses some of this functionality, and something that I use quite a bit. And in almost all cases, it is specifically to bring in primitives from configuration values. So let's go ahead and take a look here. So what we're talking about is the ability to bring in a value into a variable that is just a string, an array, or something along those lines when a class needs a specific like a configuration value or a string or some sort of constant defined somewhere. So if a user controller needs, say, the name of the project so that you can send the name of the project up to the view or something like that. That's a pretty contrived example. I'm going to actually use a more specific example here. So I know I used it in this project to get the configuration values from the config for like an API key and things along those lines. So we'll go into WordPress. And yeah, so here we have, I need to get a URL for the WordPress blog, and then the API client ID and client secret. So these are strings. It's really hard to get just out of the box. It's not easy to get those values into the object using auto loading. So what you end up doing is when WordPress API needs URL, give, and then a function. So this is the functionality that I'd like to see if we can find some better developer experience out of. It's not necessarily too bad, but I think that we could maybe make it a lot nicer if we wanted to put a little bit extra. So this is what I'm going to take a look at. So I have the Laravel framework open. I mentioned on the chat earlier that having weird lag issues with my mouse today, so I don't know what's going to go on here. Hopefully it's not too big of a problem. I'm going to restart PHP Storm. See if that will help. Extension added. Don't know why I have an error here. I don't know, maybe that will help a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the framework project. And I think I'm going to start from the tests, because the tests are going to help me figure out exactly what we're going to build. So we'll go to container, container test, contextual binding. So here we have a bunch of different ways to bring the container, and then also some specific classes that we can use to try and auto load using the container. So let's see. I think find one for primitive. Healer. All right, so this might all be the contextual binding must be all considered with classes. Thanks. The call out for the font here on chat. It's a dank mono. If anyone is interested in following the font. It has some nice ligatures, and it's unique enough that it looks a little more interesting than sort of the off-the-shelf things that you can get. Okay, so yeah, so this is closure resolution. So this is actually, but yep, no problem. Let me know if you like it. So this is actually testing string resolution, but inner make name. See if I can find. So I think the real question here is what this returns. I think because this returns contextual binding builder. So that's why I think it belongs in the contextual binding test, because I think that's what we're actually going to be building on here. So go to that class. Adding as a name. So I'm going to look up Alright, so this is when you call something like needs, what this does is it generates one of these contextual binding builder instances. So we have give tagged, which was sort of another attempt of mine to make the DX a little bit better for doing things. I think that was mine. I don't know. I'm going to take credit for it now anyway. You can call me out on it later if I didn't actually do that. But it seems like something I would have done. So let's go back to the test and build a thing that we actually would want to do here. So close that. And let's do container test context. From big. Use. Then Object from config array. Or now we'll do, yeah, I guess we'll do array. And construct. So in this case, let's do array settings. I'm going to switch this to public. So this one to construct, to username, and we'll do these both as strings. So maybe let's do, yeah, let's see if we can do something with like an optional value. Make sure that that works as well. Pull these in. Need to tweak my PHP Storm settings a bit. Create these values for the type-ins. Okay. Is that working? Ah, okay. Okay, so I think this probably gives us what we need, and I think on that I'm going to remove these type-ins as well. I don't remember how far back we need to support stuff with the framework, so this is what the rest of the file is doing, is non-type-inning, so I guess I'll just leave it like this. Now we can create a couple of test cases specifically for this, so let's do test contextual binding gives values from config. And let's see how people test the config. So I think that might be something that we'll have to deal with. But for now, let's just do what we actually are going to try and say. So we'll do container equals new container. Container when the class that we just created needs, and so we have username as one of the values, and then we want to give something. So before we would have had to do, at the very least, we would have done function and then config. Maybe this is just what we're going to have to end up doing, but this only works for modern versions of PHP. So key, and then we could say test.username. So I think this would actually work. If there's any other instances of getting stuff from the config. See where else people are using config in the test. Well, they aren't. That's awesome. Okay, so this is mocking the config class. Well, I'm going to use this functionality anyway, just to get us started. There might be a better way that we can do this, but I think this will make sure we are not going to get too stuck in some other weird stuff. I think it should be a config repository. Args config class. Well, actually, I can probably also now let's see what this does. So mock config class, bring in mockery. Get ones with args. Let's do test username. Return. Container. Install the dependencies. Apparently I didn't do that. But I don't actually want to run everything. I just want to run tests, inner, contextual binding. Okay, so we got some errors here. Object variable stub doesn't exist. Why does this test? Oh. Must be. There's something else with the way this gets loaded. It was running everything else just fine. There was an actual error. There's a bunch of skipped. The actual error was probably the new test. I'm curious why everything seemed to work just fine except for when I call it. Oh, and that's interesting too. All right. The other thing we need to do right now is change this to brand new branch. I don't want to do this on my other root package auto discovery branch. All right, so let's see if we can do filter with unit then. Okay. I don't know. I'm used to being able to run the actual file, and I'm not sure why that wasn't working. I'm not going to worry about it now. It's just big. So what we want to do is resolved instance. Container make, and then we want to make the value that we're looking for. And this by itself should probably crash things, because yeah, so class config does not exist. This is probably because this is using the global config, I believe. Make config get. Okay, so get test username. Either the method was unexpected or its arguments match did not expect. Get test username does not exist. We're going to do this. A inner I'll just do big the config. Let me get rid of all of this because I don't think that was the right way to do it. Do test username Laravel. Okay, so unresolvable dependency, resolving parameter 1 password does not work. All right, so that makes sense because we actually do require the password be set. So we'll do password. Now we're going to do test.password. I think at this point things should actually work. Now let's see. Okay, cool. So at this point, we could probably write a test that is successful using the userland implementation that we would want to do. We'll do this assert true, no, assert equals Laravel resolved instance username equals word and this assert null resolved instance. Oh, I'm doing this wrong. There we go. And then resolved instance alias. Yeah, there we go. So this test should be successful at this point. The other thing that we want to do is make sure we're testing
There's no mercy.
and we want to do all value set. Here we're going to do alias alias can be lumen. We actually want to make sure that this comes in correctly. So alias lumen. Oh no, alias again. And that should fail because we aren't actually setting a expectation for this value. So we're going to change this to alias, and we're looking for alias. Yeah, so the alias we're looking for here is lumen. Okay, cool. So we have two passing tests now that show sort of the thing that we're trying to make easier. So what I'd like to do is not have to jump through these hoops to get the stuff from the config, because doing this over and over again isn't a lot of work, but with so much stuff in Laravel aiming toward making life easier, and this being for the way I see it, this is the number one reason that I really need to use primitive binding. I want to see if we can make this a little bit easier. So I'm going to use this chance to sketch out sort of the ideal world for what we would do here. So we're going to do container when this thing needs this, give this value. Wrong, actually. There we go. So I'm going to do the same thing here. Give. So there's a bunch of different ways that I've thought about doing this, but I think the one I came up with this morning is probably the best. So I think we're going to do give config and test username. And then really all we're doing is going to make give config behind the scenes just construct this. So let's go ahead and look at the actual implementation now. So we're going to copy give tagged. We'll do I think give config value maybe. Now I'm going to leave it give config. Give config to me feels like going to give the configuration, whereas that's not exactly what we're saying here. So we're going to do define tag services to be used as implementation. Define configuration. Pass or paste and so I actually was thinking that we can do we would name the repository uses for this. It's key. Okay, cool. So we'll use the same naming here. So we're going to call this key. And I'm going to make this optional because if no key is passed, I think what I'd like to do is return all of the configuration. So this would actually serve as multiple. Uses. So you could either give the configuration or you could give a specific value from the configuration. So, the actual implementation here is going to be pretty similar. So we still have a function that we're going to have that has a container, and it's going to use the config. So we're going to say if is null, we'll just return container get big. Hello, Gregor's man. Thanks for joining. And actually, I'm going to do config get config. This as a repository. So if the key is null, we're just going to return config. Otherwise, we are going to return config get. The other thing we could potentially do is maybe give all of this same thing. So give the caller the ability to set a default all the way out. I think I like that idea. Default, use key, default. Yeah. So this is going to make us have one more test. So we'll do a value null, and let's do. Oops. And we'll call this from config with default. So I'm going to remove username and have a password. And this should let us do is password. What are you working on? Hey, Gregor's man. I'm working on building some new DX changes to Laravel's container to do some stuff with contextual binding when you are binding a primitive from config. So this is the example here of what you have to do. Like, this is the minimal amount of work. Well, not the minimal amount of work. This is probably the minimal here. If you want to bind a, say, password or an API key or something from configuration to be passed into an object, this is the least amount of work you have to do. And so what I'm aiming for is being able to do this, where don't have to actually do any sort of function call or anything. You just call give config. So that's my goal, is to do this. So we've now given the ability to pass a default. So in this case, username isn't set. So I want to set the default to be default username. And so we should be able to call this as the expected value. Looks okay. I only build something I didn't need to. So when we ask the container to build this object, it should get the default username from the container config if the user hasn't set it in the configuration themselves. So let's see here. So this should work. I change this one. I think this stuff should all work out of the box right now. Possible it won't, but tests are for. Okay, so password is required. So which test is actually failing? Optional value is null. So something isn't working here. So test that password. Okay, so implementation isn't working just yet. Git key called, so possible this was where we were having an issue. See if I can run just this test. Yeah. What I'd really like to see is what values are making it that far. So test username, test password. So those things are both getting passed. So let's see. Yeah, let's see what the configuration actually looks like. It's possible no, it is actually getting that, so it should be username, Laravel, password 102. S.password. What are we actually getting out of here? We should be getting a value, but it is saying that the required value oh, I'm actually returning V. I wonder, parameter 1 required password. Value, optional value null. Oh, awesome. That's the problem. I copied and pasted. Forgot to actually set it. So it was actually doing what it was supposed to. Fun. Okay, cool. So test pass. So this now works. Go ahead and let's strict our testing filter. We'll run everything. Okay, and I'm going to remove a bunch of my trace outputs. Now maybe I'll wait and see if everything works first. Okay, so we're going to change the same sort of things here, except in this one we're going to also pass alias. Rid of these. Okay, that still works. And this one's working, which is awesome. So we know that works. I think that's it. I'm gonna run the full test and see. Make sure that the whole test suite passes. I don't want to see skipped. I don't remember what I need to do to not see. Logging options. Allow test output. I thought there was supposed to be a way to not see. Verbose. Verbose. Okay, cool. So this is a completely unrelated error. I don't have to worry about that one. All right, so let's double check what this actually looks like. So sometimes it's nice to double check later and see if it makes sense to even commit. This is really buying anyone anything, and I think it is, because this to me is a lot nicer. This is a lot nicer way to accomplish what I do most often, and I do suspect that if other people are binding primitives at all, this is probably what they're doing. I guess the other thing that we do need to test is the other type of class. So inject array, so let's do the values from finding gives value from config array. And then the other option is give the one that we need. So here we're going to say very similar setup. Here. Container when this object needs settings, give config test. Then we should get similar output here. Alright, I need all of these. The right class, and then rather than calling these, we need settings. So this is a case where instead of, if someone wants to, instead of having individual values to be passed in, if they have something where they need to pass in an array structure from config instead, this would work for that. Let's see if we can do the tests again. Okay, so this one seems to be working. Let me break it just to make sure. Okay, cool. Undefined key. Okay, cool. Awesome. So this seems to be working more or less as expected, which is good. This is the part that I'm not really sure. Having second guesses, or having second thoughts on this. I don't think there would be, like, the other option here is to do config all and pass back all of the values for the config. I don't see much of a use for that. I think that more likely people would want to get an actual instance of the config object itself rather than to get an array that represents all of the configuration values. I think this does make sense to do it this way. And then that means we need a new type. So we're going to do container test context from container test context object big. We'll just call it inject config, and then we actually I want to double check and see this big contract, so let's actually use that. In alias. Need to remove the one that was imported already, and I can get rid of this called a mockery, which sort of makes me happy too. Simplify, so this object needs a config object, and so we are going to create a new test. So this one's a little less oh, crud. Alright, so I see what happened here. So the problem is that we actually needed the proper repository implemented. Because we're actually creating instances of it. Yeah, so these are all good now, which is what we want. And then down here we're going to do repository. Here we'll do the contract, and then we will alias it. Call it repository contract. Okay, cool. So now in our test, put a thing here. I'll use so when it needs config, give config. So this one I'm a little less sure anyone's going to want to support, because this is, you could just say give repository part. I think would work. So again, I'm not sure this is right. You could also do give config. So I think this would actually work as well. So I don't know if this is actually a legit thing to do, but it's easy enough to include. So we can see if this is cool. So we need a different class though. Inject big. And then resolved instance is this, which means these values should config. Should be able to do that. Alright, so uninstantiable, so eliminate contracts config repository. Yeah, I know it's not. Oh, because it's interesting. Maybe we don't need this at all. Let's see if this just works. So target is not instantiable. Okay, let's see here. Alright, so failed asserting that null matches expected Laravel. Okay, so this is actually doing something. Called Vincent's test. Ah, so this actually needs the test docs. Alright, so this passes. So let's see if this actually, how much this buys us. Because if pretty sure it didn't work without any configuration. I want to double check. Yeah, because it doesn't know about config repository, and that might just be because we need an alias for it. Let's do alias abstract. Interesting, because I feel like this should work. Oh, I have it reversed. So the abstract is kind of alias. Okay. Okay, so I think this might actually be a different fix. So what we can do with this is decide he is never going to be null. Don't have to use. Or as a possibility, so we're always going to pass back a scalar, or at least whatever we can get from get. And we aren't going to worry about this other type. The other thing I want to try then, say if I ask for a repository, does it work? And why is that? That's probably because we need to alias to repository as well. I think this is probably another issue I've had in the past, that the only way I could get config was to actually ask specifically for config. So if these aliases are set, then it's a little easier to figure out what we actually need. So check repository. There. Context inject. Big. Whereas or as interface contract. So this would actually be two separate contracts. So this should work, and then contract, this one should work here. Contract, presentation. Cool. These all work now, so the trick is to figure out where these aliases need to be added. Because they shouldn't have to be added here. I'm going to comment these both out. Cool. So need target uninsatiable, one error and then a failure. Okay. Exactly sure why one's a failure and one's an error, but it looks like this probably okay, so I need to figure out where config is created. could be a little tricky. So we've got config, repository test. Guessing it's maybe in foundation. Or spiders. And where is it? Here. Creations. Register core container aliases. So it seems like it should be doing this. I wonder if maybe it is already doing it, and so it's fine because we are not in the test here. We aren't actually booting the whole application, so this config value doesn't actually fit. I think this probably is okay. But a normal application, but if someone is using the container, we don't actually need to do this. We don't need to do either of these tests, and we don't need to test this use case because it already works, or it should always work, from an application, and it shouldn't be expected to work if you're using the container outside of the application. And it has nothing to do with the injection stuff. So I'm going to remove these. We don't need to do this. We also get to remove these classes. See if our tests still pass. Okay, cool. So I'm pretty satisfied with that. So we got key, we got value. We get null back in cases where null makes sense, or at least in cases where config is going to return null. So I think we're good. This. So the next piece on this, if the team decides to accept it would be to write up some docs, which will be fun. But for now, I'm going to commit this as is. Let's see. That last pass here, the repository. So, actually, let's maybe not do. I don't think that's something that they would normally do. I'm fine. So define configuration key to be used to look up in configuration defined. That sounds really clumsy, but we'll leave it there for now. Like there's space there. Rex. Need both of these. I don't need repository contract. Adding repository for config, test, give values from config, optional value null. So this is where alias is null, and that still is null, and everything passes. This is one where the alias is set, and otherwise everything else but actually has extra set in there. Username, password, username, password, username, alias. So this up. Here we're testing to make sure the alias is set correctly, and then here we have values from it, but default. So here we only have password set. We're getting the username, or we're configuring the username with the default username, and then we're configuring the password without a default, and we end up with the default username since we didn't actually have that in our config. And then values from config array. So here we have test, and we are asking to give the config test, which gives us an array, and then we're able to test that the settings are all top level things. So, because in this case we are getting array at test, so we're passing in username, password, and alias as values. I think that's exactly what we're looking for here. And then our little helper classes. So let's see. So merging this PR will specify creation. For primitive binding. Allow users. Yes, thank you for catching that. Allow users to specify configuration keys be used for primitive binding. So we can use the original thing, which I think was FN. Yeah. So I think this is the gist of it. Essentially going to make sure that people understand what this is for, how it's used, and that it really is just nicer DX or something that people can already do. Just nicer, I guess. A little easier to write, a little easier to maintain, a little less the word visual noise. I think that's something that we're talking about a while back. So I'm going to rename it to, or reuse this one as this way, because honestly, this format is really only usable for PHP 7, PHP 8 maybe it's PHP 7.4, I can't remember. So this is actually the more common version that people would be using now, and this is actually what I've been using in a lot of places. So just a lot busier, and this is a lot, for me, a lot easier to follow and understand, and makes a lot of sense. So let's see here. I actually need to hop off the stream here shortly, but I did make it within my time frame, which is pretty awesome. That I was able to do this in about an hour. Oh. Copy and paste. Missed something here. Hey, you're very welcome. Thanks for joining Slarty Blast. I'm happy to, I think I saw that you sent a follow, or whatever Twitch calls it, a while back, so it's good to actually get a chance to talk. So thanks for joining today. Oh, okay. I'm gonna force push my change. Okay, cool. And so I'm going to remove this bit here. Wow, even my typing is laggy today. It's weird. Most of the time when I'm doing primitive binding, it's for purpose of duration values.
Strangest addiction, I could say I'll without any conviction. Broke my own heart this time for believing that a ghost could find a body alive that hasn't seen the other side. So don't call me, I'll find something to escape my mind. What's the cost when there's no love lost between us? So burn the
All right, cool. So not too bad. The ratio of test code to actual implementation code is pretty laughable here. I think there's one other thing I wanted to add. So if this may require additional work on track. I'll do approved. All right, so I think that's it. So I'm gonna go ahead and send this pull request, see how it goes. Pretty excited about this one because I've had this on my brain on and off for like forever, really. The primitive binding stuff is really awesome. It's just, again, almost every single time I want to do it, it's just getting a value from the config. And things are getting a little easier with like the short function syntax, but really this just seems like a really quick win for DX, and it might make people more apt to use primitive binding if this is what their use case usually is anyway. So anyway, thanks for joining. Looks like there were a couple of people watching today, so appreciate that. And if I don't stream again this weekend, I should be back Tuesday night. Thanks again. Bye.